When nations lose power, it is rarely sudden. It happens quietly, in meeting rooms, in joint statements, in decisions not to call Washington anymore. I'm Fareed Zakaria, and what we are witnessing right now is something extraordinary. America's closest allies are not drifting away by accident, they are organizing without us. For years, Russia and China tried to fracture US alliances from the outside. In 2026, the sitting American president is doing it from within. France, Germany, Britain, Denmark, Poland, not adversaries, allies, warning the United States, rebuking it, scaling back cooperation, questioning its values. And yet, the White House insists America is respected again. That contradiction between rhetoric and reality is the story of this moment. If you care about how global power really works, this is a conversation you cannot ignore. Stay with me. Because to understand how America reached this point, we must first understand what changed and why the world is responding so differently now. At the center of this story is not a single decision, or even a single crisis. It is a pattern. The United States built its global influence not just on military strength, but on trust, on shared rules, shared language, shared restraint. Allies did not always agree with Washington, but they believed in the system Washington upheld. That assumption is now breaking down. What your allies are reacting to is not simply policy disagreements. It is unpredictability, threats made casually, military actions taken without consultation, values once treated as non-negotiable, suddenly optional. When European leaders warn that they will not stop defending sovereignty and territorial integrity, they are not lecturing an adversary. They are drawing a line against a partner they no longer fully recognize. This is why the backlash feels so severe and so coordinated. It is not emotional. It is structural. And once trust at the structural level begins to erode, alliances do not collapse overnight. They quietly rewire. To see how that rewiring began, we need to step back and look at the historical foundations now under strain. For decades, the international order rested on a simple bargain. The United States would lead not just with power, but with restraint. In return, allies accepted American primacy because it felt predictable, lawful, and anchored in shared values. That order did not emerge by chance. It was constructed after catastrophe, after borders were violated, sovereignty ignored, and power left unchecked. Institutions like the United Nations, collective security arrangements, and intelligence sharing were designed to prevent exactly that kind of chaos. What makes the current moment so destabilizing is not that America is strong. It's that America is acting as if the rules it helped build no longer apply to itself. When allies object to military offensives that violate the UN Charter or warn of a breakdown of values by the United States, they are not debating tactics. They are defending the logic of the system itself. And once that logic is questioned, history tells us what happens next. States hedge, partners diversify, and leadership slowly, almost imperceptibly shifts. That brings us to the first visible rupture, where quiet concern turned into open resistance. It began with Greenland. In a move that stunned the world, President Trump floated the idea of buying the territory from Denmark, a clear challenge to long-standing diplomatic norms. His threats regarding Greenland weren't just about territory. They were about power, sovereignty, and America's role in an evolving global order. The response came swiftly. France, Germany, Britain, Italy, Spain, Poland, the traditional pillars of the Western alliance, issued a joint declaration. They would not stop defending sovereignty. They declared this wasn't just a diplomatic protest. It was a reaffirmation of principles that the United States had long championed. This wasn't an isolated incident. Weeks later, the United States faced an emergency session at the United Nations Security Council. Allies who once stood by America now accused it of violating the UN Charter. Trump's actions in Venezuela were the final straw. The military offensive was seen as undermining the very foundation of international order. And while the world reacted, America's response was almost surreal. Trump claimed that the US was more respected than ever. Yet, the rising tide of criticism told a different story. What's important here is the pattern, the cumulative effect of these small but significant actions and the realignment they are causing. Behind every policy shift, there is a deeper, more insidious mechanism at work, a fundamental change in how the world perceives US leadership. It's not just about individual policies anymore. It's about a system coming apart at the seams. When allies like the Netherlands and Great Britain scale back their participation in US-led missions, they are sending a signal. They no longer trust Washington to act in a way that aligns with their interests. The drug trafficking mission in the Caribbean became a flashpoint when American military operations targeted civilian boats. Allies, once eager partners, now reconsider their involvement. For the Netherlands, the US is no longer a reliable partner. For Great Britain, the intelligence sharing has stopped. This is the mechanism of erosion. It doesn't happen in one dramatic moment. It happens in the quiet withdrawal, the refusal to act in concert, the deliberate distancing, and once those ties begin to unravel, the fabric of the alliance begins to fray. This slow process is exactly what Russia and China have long hoped for, a fractured, isolated United States. But they aren't the ones causing it. America is doing the work for them. The question now is, what does this all mean for the people who live under the umbrella of these international agreements, these alliances, these shared values? It means fear. It means disappointment. It means uncertainty. When America's allies start looking inward, recalibrating their alliances and interests, it creates a ripple effect that reaches ordinary citizens, not just in the United States, but across the globe. The United States may claim to be strong and respected again, but for those on the receiving end of these broken partnerships, it feels different. It feels isolating. It feels like betrayal. People in Europe, Asia, and Latin America are beginning to see the cracks in the global system they once trusted. They're looking for new solutions, new partners, new frameworks, ones where they aren't constantly worried about Washington's next unpredictable move. In this new world, it's not just the political class that feels the seismic shift. It's the people who depend on these alliances to keep the peace, to maintain trade, to safeguard their sovereignty. The United States is no longer the anchor. It's the destabilizing force. And that is the hardest truth to accept. As this reconfiguration unfolds, the effects ripple beyond borders, across continents. The United States is no longer a singular force. It is increasingly irrelevant in some of the world's most crucial diplomatic and military theaters. The influence of the European Union, for example, has been on the rise as it positions itself as a counterweight to Washington's erraticism. Countries once reliant on American military protection are now seeking alternative security arrangements. In the Middle East, new coalitions are emerging outside the influence of the US. The Asian Pacific, where Washington had long been the dominant player, now sees China's influence growing rapidly. In some ways, it is the emergence of the multipolar world that America's founders feared. A world in which no one nation could unilaterally shape the rules, but instead, nations acted according to their own interests and regional partnerships. But this reordering is not simply a shift in power. It is a collapse of trust in a system that had once been stable, a world that relied on a common language of diplomacy, law, and mutual defense is now being replaced by one driven by competition, rivalry, and isolation. America's role in that transition? The great disruptor. The future is not predetermined. 3 paths lay before us, each equally plausible, and all of them come with profound consequences. The first path is optimistic. In this future, America confronts the consequences of its actions. It undergoes a transformation, a return to its roots, rebuilding trust, reforming alliances, reassuring the world that its commitment to peace and shared values is still intact. This would require leadership, vision, and a deep re-engagement with the international system it once helped create. But it is possible, and it would require the United States to put its own house in order, to forge a new consensus based on diplomacy, respect, and mutual interest. The second path is more uncertain. Here, the United States remains in a state of distrust with its allies. Relations are fractured, but not irreparable. The world is marked by tension. As old alliances falter and new ones emerge, America is no longer the unquestioned leader, but its power still matters. The future is one of unpredictable fluctuations, where the U.S. is forced to adapt, not always to its advantage, as it navigates a world that no longer operates under the same rules it once imposed. The third path is grim. In this future, America's withdrawal from the global stage deepens. Its allies find other paths, new power structures form, and the U.S. is left on the sidelines of a world it once shaped. The economic, military, and diplomatic leadership of America fades into the background as China, Russia, and other emerging powers become the new arbiters of global affairs. A fragmented world, once unified under American influence, becomes a battlefield of competing ideologies. This, unfortunately, may already be the road we are on, but we still have time to choose. In the end, this isn't just about Donald Trump. It's about a deeper question: what does it mean for a nation to lead? Leadership has never been about raw power alone. It has always been about the willingness to uphold the system, the rules, the order, the values that guide global cooperation. When a leader falters, when they forget the cost of upholding these shared principles, the world notices, and it reacts. We are witnessing the unraveling of something extraordinary, the global consensus that the United States was once at the center of. But this story is not over. The world is watching America not just with fear, but with hope. Hope that it will rediscover its place in the world as a responsible leader. Hope that, despite the forces of disintegration, there is still a chance for reconstruction. But the truth is clear. If America continues down this path of self-sabotage, it will not just lose influence, it will lose respect, and that is the hardest thing to rebuild. So the question remains, what path will we choose? Because the future, for better or worse, starts now. And to the world, will you wait for America to catch up, or will you move forward without us? That is the crossroads we face today. This moment in history is not simply a question of policies or personalities. It is a reflection of the world we are creating for future generations. When nations fail to live up to the expectations of their allies, when they abandon the ideals that once defined them, the consequences extend far beyond politics. The foundation of international order is built on trust, on shared commitment, and when that foundation cracks, it isn't just the government that suffers. It's the people. The American people may never fully grasp the depth of this shift until they feel its consequences, not in the rhetoric of politicians, but in the practical reality of a less secure, more divided world. As for the rest of the world, they will no longer look to Washington to provide solutions. They will look inward to each other to find new ways of forging peace, protecting sovereignty, and securing their futures. The United States may still possess immense power, but power alone is not enough to command respect. Respect is earned, and in the quiet corridors of diplomacy, that respect is slipping away. So the challenge lies before us. Can America rebuild the trust it has lost? Or will we see the emergence of a new global order, one that no longer counts the United States at the table? The choice is ours, and the world is watching. This is where the story ends for now. But the next chapter begins with every decision we make today.